Thank all of you for being here, and I'm so excited. That's going to be a good time today. How's everyone doing?
Right.
Doing great.
Great. Thank you.
To start off, I have a general question. Were any of you fans of Darth Vader or Star Wars before landing the role?
I was 5 years old when I first went to see Star Wars in 1977. I didn't know anything about Star Wars. We all went to the pictures for the first time to see these great ships. And I was sat there, my dad pushing, with the cinema to the left. They have two screens, this cinema, in a Prestatyn, North Wales. I was 5, drinking Coca-Cola, eating popcorn, waiting for spaceships. No spaceships, but a guy in bed with a woman and me. And what's that? And what my dad didn't want to see Star Wars, so he snuck me in to see Pink Panther at the same time. That was my introduction to Star Wars. The next day, my mum took me to see Star Wars. I, like everybody, when I first seen Vader, I didn't get scared. It was like, in fact, looking in a mirror. The original trilogy, they were my Star Wars films. I love it. All the other Star Wars films are great. I love being part of Rogue One, which is incredible. It's an honor to play Darth Vader and to feel what you guys felt. The dark side is very powerful, and he's a very, very powerful character.
I wasn't introduced to Star Wars as a kid because I grew up sheltered. I watched Star Wars the first time when I was 17. I love the Darth Vader, obviously, super cool, but for superficial reason. Awesome sword, flips, powers, really cool. It wasn't until doing scene research that I fell in love with the character. And that's where you understand the depth behind the character and why it's such an iconic villain. Most people don't understand that Vader could sense everyone's intentions and emotion. It's a very profound experience because it's ultimate power.
Very special.
I can echo what Dmitrious said, partially because we shared some of that. I remember doing some scene work. I was definitely a fan beforehand. I don't remember the first time I saw the movie, but I remember playing it in the old days before they had really good lightsabers. It was just a red flashlight with a white plastic tube on it. That was your lightsaber. I can't remember. I don't think it was part of the audition, but it was scene work. Debra Chow, our director, was very kind with their time and definitely helped some of the movement and character discovery, which is rare from a stunt perspective. A lot of the director will rubber stamp something and say, that looks great, but rarely spend time working on the character with a stunt performer. That was a great experience with Dmitrious. We were in the suit, and I think she said it was Deb, and then her assistant Steph was there, and they said, just walk up to Steph. Steph was reading the lines in the scene, and Deb whispered, come up and intimidate the hell out of her. But standing in the full kit and over someone, of course, you still feel like an actor. You're embodying the character, but you still feel like a bit of an actor in that moment. There was no set at this point, just gray stage floor and gray walls and all that. But after when I was out of costume, Steph came and said, that was absolutely terrifying. Looking up at Vader, standing over you, reading the lines. She said, that was terrifying. That resonated with me. How others perceive you fed back into the character as a feedback loop.
Another cool thing people don't realize about Vader is when someone is facing Vader, what they see is they see their reflection through Vader's goggles. They see the fear in their own eyes. That's something I experienced when I played Vader, and I realized what it means to be behind the suit. They see their own fear projected back at them.
And to work with Tom and Dmitrious, and in prep for the voice and dialogue, I watched all the films. I watched everything I could as far as James Earl Jones is concerned. And I got to a space of, you have to understand the person, understand who Vader is. Do not imitate, do not do a characterization, be Vader. When you start talking about Anakin in his progression to Vader and being so gifted, there's no one that can truly relate to your existence and all that you have available to you. The power of love is one key thing. When you look at the power of Obi-Wan, his love for Obi-Wan, power of Padme, Vader's driving force is the love of his son. And having this immensity that nobody can connect or relate or understand, as far as your plan is 1,000 steps beyond everybody within you.
When you found out you'd be carrying on the tradition of playing the most iconic villain in history, was there any emotional weight? Was there any stress of, oh my God, like I'm going to be carrying the tradition? And how did you deal with that?
I've played a characters like the Wolfman and Frankenstein, and there's one bit of Vader, and he takes over the actor. It just happens, and you become him. Obviously, we did a little bit of movement with Full Casey, where if your gate was out a half an inch, a fan would see that.
Yeah.
And you're gonna get pulled for that. So if you're off a little bit there, the presence and spirit of Vader is always the same because there's only one.
Would you
So
say
that's
that
rough.
because of the way the costume and design and how uncomfortable it is, it helps you get into character?
I did, you know, I've done a lot of characters. I've got a 1 to 10 with difficulty. The costume is a 1 or 2 for me anyway, because I've worked a lot more difficult costumes. For me, he's all good. If you ask Vader, if he had to sprint and jump over some boxes, then all right, it's going to get probably uncomfortable. But Vader's a very cool character, and he doesn't do that. He walks around and uses the Force. He's just cool.
I don't know.
That's Tom's the only person outside of me who knows how hard that suit is. I didn't have any extreme movements, but I did a lot of training. Tom did like falling, jumping, fighting, quick movement. That suit is not easy.
No, not
just
to
for me
do that.
personally, I lose
Yeah.
about 70% of my flexibility the moment I go into the suit. My
Right,
body is in
okay.
a prison.
Now, I have a question for Spencer. I'm sure there's been more difficult suits. Quick question about Rogue One. When you guys come down the first bit of entrance, is that a ramp? Because
Very gradual.
Demetrious had a pretty steep one out of the tie.
It's the suit to do ramps.
It's not difficult walking through steam. The visor's plastic. You go completely blind. That's when the Force comes in.
Did you have to deal with fog in the visor with breath?
Oh, everybody, yeah.
On the first day, this is no excuse. I was coming down on the tail end of a flu or cold, so my body was really hot. So I steamed at the visor there. But I remember on the first day they give us the additional dialogue, and this is how I got into the character. And I was going, don't be too short. I was doing the breath. They must have been laughing. That was funny.
Yes, these two guys, Tom O'Connell and Dmitrious Bistrevsky. I remember one day I had to come back several times because the fight was engaged. It's like 3 or 4 hours straight of engagement. Same with Dmitrious. When I would watch him on screen, the discipline, calmness, and power projected for long times to get every angle in a shot. It's bananas. I don't know how you do that and stay committed and truthful. I had a close-up view of what was happening with every nuance as far as your body, your presence, and the demands of the scene. It was truthful every time. The commitment was bananas.
I appreciate that. We were extremely fortunate. The dedication went into it, not just for those of us doing the performance piece, Dorian and Dmitrious and myself, but then we had Debra, who took great care with the character, Olga, our movement coach, who was helping us make sure that those movements were precise. Debra was watching the performance, but Olga was watching the movements. I remembered rehearsals with Dmitrious, Debra, and others, things like an exhale. Does the volume knob on that exhale look like a heavy sigh or just a breath? When you turn your head, is it a sharp or a 2 on the volume knob? Everything was measured carefully. I give a lot of credit to Debra and Olga and Dmitrious for that level of detail because it matters. The luxury we all have in this day and age is we did grow up as fans. Getting back to the original question, we understand that responsibility. It was as easy as saying, what would I want to see as a fan? What version of Vader do I want to see? What representation of Vader do I want to see? And that's the easiest way to answer.
I watched every second of your performance. It was a transformation. They were not the same people. When I was watching them, when I would see Tom and talk to Dmitrious, it was a stark difference. It's almost like they were taken over. It was amazing.
We channeled it.
Yeah.
When I got the role, I had this freak out moment because we knew we were making Star Wars history. Filling a void in the story. We were doing a piece of history that will be immortalized. It was do or die. Every person on set knew the gravity of this project, how important it was, because this is the most iconic character in cinema history. So when I got the role, I had this freak out moment of I'm not going to be good enough. I'm going to mess up, ruin Vader for everybody. My first homework from Debra was a specific walk. They wanted to fuse David Prowse with the modern versions of Vader, having different forms of intensity gauges. I made a promise to myself that I'm just going to 10x everything and approach it the way I approached my circus career, which is just train 10 hours a day, nonstop, and pull pedal to the metal and just go 100%. So I've ended up practicing the walk of every variation for over 1,000 hours. I walked a trail in my backyard. And then Tom and I went through a boot camp for a month and a half with Olga, retraining our bodies specifically so we could have a matching movement with Vader. And then I worked even further with Olga, creating a whole Rolodex of movements of how does Vader breathe? How do we build up anger, sense people, turn? And every little moment, we created a whole sign language. So basically, I would get notes from Olga in real time through sign language that we made up giving me notes in real time. So I would get notes from Debra after every take. I would get notes from Olga in real time as I'm doing the scene, and then more notes. Dorian would get notes, and we would correlate with each other. So this whole idea was that we put this character under so much scrutiny because it had to be perfect. I think we delivered a perfect Vader. Every single person. Tom, I know how hard Tom trained for that role. He had 4 months straight of just sword camp. I trained 10 hours a day for like 5 months. I know how hard Dorian approached the role. Dorian and I worked together intimately, and we even formed a psychic bond where we could sense each other's choices, and we're both doing the character simultaneously, the voice and the movement. We understood how important this was for everybody as an artist, the integrity of showing up not to your best that day, but the best of time.
Absolutely.
That's the standard that we're holding.
Tom, I
And
have
we
a
did it.
question for you. Darth Vader throughout the original trilogy is often unfairly criticized as slower in terms of like combat, especially that first ever fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi. But Rogue One finally gave us a look at what Darth Vader in his prime can truly move. You helped further that with excellent saber play. Now, how hard was it to overcome limited visibility when doing lightsaber combat?
Great question. I'll answer two pieces of that. The visor is just an obstacle. It's part of the gig. The other guys would agree. Dmitrious would practice blindfolded. It was a muscle memory exercise. You have to know the choreography so well. This is a stunt performer. If the actor misses a beat, it's your job not to injure them. A lot of it is just part of the gig. When the visor fogs up, and Dmitrious experienced this too. The first scene we shot at the rock quarry was early spring in LA. It's cold at night, warm during the day. By the time we were ready, the visor fogged before they yelled action, completely fogged. In that scene, and this is inside baseball for my film people, but like they had a Condor crane up there with the light balloon, like the blimp basically was the only lighting they had. The first time I had to fight with Ewan, we had practiced and trained in the gym. And then out there, it was like, okay, now here's 17 new variables for you. Your only light is coming from stark moonlight or an overhead blimp. The weather causes the visor to fog up immediately, and it's on loose gravel. So the footing was unstable. But as Obi-Wan was taking big reactions, basically, I like to tell the story to people. Imagine if you turn all the lights off in a pitch black room and occasionally you see a fluorescent bulb cross your face, adding on to the notes Debra gave to Dmitrious, something Spencer said earlier. Darth Vader in that moment is his most powerful, his most stoic. He's completely beating the tar out of Obi-Wan. And so there was no stumbling. Like the latter fight, we had the freedom to stumble and had more freedom with movement between strikes. But for that one, it was incredibly measured and controlled and stable, no movement in the upper body, just gliding. To be able to do that and try to figure out where the hell Ewan was in that moment was definitely a challenge. And I'm sure Dmitrious went through the same thing that night.
We figured out after shooting that scene, the spray for the goggles to fix the issue.
The scuba spray.
When we shot the street scene and the night scenes, we hadn't figured that out yet. So when I would do the street scene, I think by the time they yell action, it's already fogged. And by the end of the scene, I'm completely blind. And one time I walked into a wall and one time I walked into a barrel. So I was counting steps and I'm matching where I think I'm supposed to go and just waiting for cut and walk into a wall, sensing the force. You start sensing your environment. You rely on muscle memory and instinct more than vision and sound.
Well, the fun bit ties into this question and the last one you asked, the fun bit, and this is where Dmitrious and I had a tough time with the suit, was they would change the terrain on us. It would, you guys still see me? Sorry.
Yeah.
So they changed the terrain on us. I remember we had choreographed the final fight and moved into the space. The art department had made the surface of the moon stepped. Every 3 or 4 paces, there was a change in elevation, either up or down, making it almost like a slate. So that was a bit tricky because we had to then re-choreograph the fight to say, okay, beat. Then there's a step up, a step down. And so there was a lot of that, trying to figure that out with the fight team. And that made it more challenging to move in the suit. From the stunts and the choreography side was, if you think about the patchwork of a quilt, there's the prequels, and then there's episode 1, 2, and 3. If you reverse those and say episode 1, 2, and 3 are here, and then you have the prequels, we are in that middle gap between what was then Rogue One. It was like, how do you tie those two quilts together and make it make sense? When you ask about Vader in episode 4, when that fight was very measured with Obi-Wan, it would be like kendo, right? They were very far away from each other. It was a very measured stance, and all the swings, it was like 1, 2, 3, and then they would back away again from each other. The simple way to say it is the suit's really hard to move in, so they had to fight in a linear way. From a storytelling standpoint, it's how do we make it so that it makes sense that they respected each other enough as fighters to give each other that distance. And we added that beat in our fight, spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't seen Obi-Wan, where they smash the box and Obi-Wan starts cutting away at the suit. And that way, when they fought later in episode 4, at least in the timeline chronologically, it made sense that he would want to keep his distance from Obi-Wan because he knew the suit was his weak point as Vader. They have to respect that distance. And there were other elements that we tried to add in, little colors and brush strokes where we thought, oh, this will add to the idea that they respect each other as the ultimate fighters and need to give each other space and safety when fighting.
Question for you, Dmitrious, before I hand it over to my Legion brothers. I read some stuff. I heard that you would rehearse with a blindfold, like some Ninja Turtle or something. Can you expound on that?
Yeah. So I've done quite a bit of suit work. We knew the restrictions. Debra even warned us that suit's a hard suit to wear. You're going to lose your hearing sound. We wore the tester suits before, so we knew how restricting it was. And the biggest one was that you didn't have peripheral vision at all. And the hardest thing with the suit was I built my own home suit to rehearse in. Rehearsals with Olga, to keep the posture of Vader, I can't look at people because Vader is always up here. If I look to hold the posture, I could never see the floor and I could never see my mark and I could never see the people I'm interacting with. So what we did was we learned how to count steps. And that was a huge important one. We trained with a metronome so we could change the pace at any point in time and I could fine tune to the pace of whatever speed we needed it. But the second one was to learn how to count steps. So we'd build obstacle courses, blindfold, count the steps, first count it when you could see, and then we'd blindfold it and do it blindfolded and count and see how accurate your steps are. And then they got more intricate. You take a right turn, go underneath, you pick something up, you come back, and you see how good your sensual, like your sense memory and a mental 3D picture of the environment. By the end, even when the eyes fogged up, or you couldn't see your mark, you just kept going. I would count the steps. Sometimes I miscounted. One time I miscounted to walk into the fire. That was a tiny bit. Dorian?
I got a question for Tom, Dmitrious, and Spencer. When acting, you're feeding off of who are in the scene. And have all this technical stuff to be cognizant of. And then you have the truthfulness as far as what the scene is about, who's before you, and what they're giving you in that emotional exchange. In real time, you've got Olga, Debra, you've got me, and we're all working in sync as far as voice, body, action, stunts, and acting control as far as the truth of the moment. How did you manage all that as far as what you're getting in vocal delivery, what you're getting as far as Olga is concerned, and what you're getting as far as the truth and reality in the scene and all the technical stuff you have to manage and navigate through? How did that work?
Dmitrious, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So for me, I had done so much training that I was able to let go. And the biggest issue that I thought I was going to have was basically the delay between Dorian and myself. I have an earpiece. Dorian is doing the voice. It's being channeled into my ear and on a speaker. As Dorian speaks, I have to react in real time to make it authentic. I thought there was always going to be a slight delay. What happened was within the first rehearsal, Dorian and I synced up completely. In my circus training, I did improv to music where you play a song, you don't know what music is coming up. Same with breakdance, it's similar. And you just go off the music, your instincts just go. You let it go and you, without judgment, and approach authentically. With Dorian's voice, my body synced up like it was music. His voice became the music I would dance to. As we were doing the performance, I would channel my anger, let it go. I would focus on the intention of that moment specifically. And then everything else, even though I was cognitive of it, I would see Olga, the lights, other people get notes, feedback, sound, everything happening at the same time. It was just a dance in real time. I was just reacting in the moment. It was magic. It was the force. That was my...
I can echo that. We should never not give kudos to Dorian for being able to watch the monitor and sync with us as well. To do that is a skill in itself. Credit to the team, Dorian, for being able to do that. And I noticed earlier when you were talking about embodying the character, there was a moment where you said a line and it almost sounded like you drifted right into the voice again, which was awesome.
I don't let him out too much.
It just dropped right into that rhythm. I was like, nice.
Thank you.
It was really great to watch Dorian and Dmitrious work, to watch Hayden work with you, Debra work with Hayden and Dmitrious. It was really great. They allowed us that freedom to be present and to be a fly on the wall, even when you're not in the scene. I credit Dmitrious and Dorian and a bit to myself. I'm glad we all took that responsibility and that job of sticking around to see what the other people were doing. One of my favorite pictures was one that I'm sure wasn't allowed and one of the crew members took. It's of all of us watching Hayden do the scene with Ewan when the mask is cracked open. And it's one of my favorite pictures because I'm literally standing there in full gator kit minus the helmet and the cape, watching it on the monitor and seeing whatever all the fans saw when that mask cracked open, and they had that very emotional exchange with the light going from red to blue. As Dmitrious said, the training had set in, the muscle memory was there. It was a shorthand between Dorian, Dmitrious, myself, Debra, Olga, and Hayden included, which is everybody was all in that same rhythmic flow at that point. And so any adjustments that needed to be made, maybe it was a few words more vicious, take his head off. Now, I also had the luxury of the fight team where we treated it as a collaborative moment. Go do your thing. I had followed Shaw, Matt Emig, and Sean Aiden, the core fight team, giving me notes like, that was great. Next time, whip your head faster, or make sure that stroke is good and level across when Ewan dodges underneath. And as much as we would fine tune the walk or the head nod or the volume of those different movements, they were there to help me give notes, the combat pieces of the lightsaber choreography, which was really great as well.
One thing I want to add was the intensity. We all synced up with Vader and we were shooting everything in chronological order. As we were approaching the final episode, this tension and wave of pressure was brewing. We knew the climax was coming and everyone's intensity kept increasing. I was training by myself. I was training 5 hours a day. Tom was training like a beast, getting skinnier because of all the cardio. Dorian, Hayden, we're feeling this pressure of this moment of the biggest scene of all is the confrontation. And that was a cool part because even though we weren't talking to each other, everyone felt the pressure. Everyone was on the same wavelength of Vader, and we're all moving forward towards the story moment.
I'll give one more tip of the hat to Julian Howarth, who was the sound engineer on set. Something they did that was really cool, and this is our tip of the hat to Ray and Liam from episode 1, Phantom Menace, but they would play Duel of the Fates during the fights.
Yeah.
So when we were doing the wide master shot and there wasn't any dialogue, he would crank the volume and we would just beat the crap out of each other. Credit again to John Williams for making such an incredible score. All that music and tension that Dmitrious mentioned, how could you not give 110, 120% when you have all that on set with you? It was great.
Spencer, dude, how did that happen on the mechanics? Vader's always been multiple moving parts.
My thing there now were very calm. But I'm not doing any of the fights, I standard all that. And with lightsaber stuff. Mine was very deep into Ben Mulvey and Krennic, and we were battling with it. It's the first time I felt, because normally when I'm having a battle on screen, it's physical. I'm kicking and punching him. But that's the first time I've ever experienced it, in just in the acting with the presences. There's nothing punching going on. It's just two actors going at it. But because Krennic was the boss of his planet or whatever, and then Vader's just putting him into his place. And I enjoyed watching Vader do his thing. I'm like, do you know what I'm saying?
It's such a great scene.
I've got Krennic on his knees and I'm choking him. Obviously, it's different dialogue. Krennic was getting choked out for real, mate. He was going red. He just doesn't see you turn around, be careful not to choke in your aspirations, don't you? But obviously, it was different dialogue for me on the day. But it was just like, whoa, I was along for the ride, man.
So cool.
But yeah, it's not as exciting as the boys in the costume doing the fights. But I had my little moment as well. Do you know what I mean?
One more, and then I'm going to pass it off to Chris. Dorian, my apologies, but during my research, I know Lucasfilm likes to keep things quiet, and not necessarily intentionally, but sometimes things just don't make it out in the media. You've been phenomenal in describing your role, even without having to answer the question up until this point, but can you describe what your role entailed on Obi-Wan Kenobi? And the importance, because it seems like both the guys who've worked with you have hyped you up.
My job was to emote the voice and give truth to what was being communicated. Yeah. Communication happens on so many different levels, and we had to work as one. 70% of communication goes beyond what you say. There's a lot of other dynamics that go into what is being expressed and the impact of what the outcome will be. And so I had to be at one with these gentlemen and referring back to the Force in my delivery, which I was getting notes, of course, and observation. I had to be as close as possible. The objective was for me to be as close as I could to whoever was engaged in the scene, feeding off an energy. The truth of the moment comes when you're actually, there's a give and take and exchange. It goes beyond what you say. What you say is the end product of what's happened previously. There's history and what's happening currently. You have to be close to feed off of that. I had to give truth to who Vader was. These characters we love are timeless because they truly exist. Vader took over. And whenever any character comes into play, there is a light that you're putting on the skin of and letting take over. My job was to give truth to all the moving parts of Vader. Vader's always been multiple moving parts. And I just have to, for you guys, Spencer, all of you, the amount of what is required for all the mechanics of making Vader come to life, talking about stunt, we first talk about the physicality of Vader. When you start talking about the delivery of vocal delivery, the intricacy of making Vader machine man and spirit and making that one, which is what he symbolized and embodied, the complexity of that is beyond comprehension. I spoke of their technical expertise, having to do this for 16 hours and follow all this input to funnel through the truth of this moment. I am always amazed when I'm looking into your eyes and looking into your being, watching every nuanced movement that you made and trying to sync up with that. What can I say?
Thank you. I'm going to add on to Dorian's answer. When we were doing rehearsals in the beginning, they were having me trying to do the lines. I was trying to find the character, but also what we found was when I was in the suit and I would deliver the lines, the helmet would shake slightly. It would be a lot of work to fix it in post. I couldn't nail the movement and do the lines at the same time. If I focused on the lines, the movement would backslide. If I focused on the movement. So Debra had this idea of what if we get the voice actor to be on set? And instead of recording it in post, he's going to be on set and he's going to be doing the lines in person and we're going to both be doing this dance. And she pitched it to me and I said, that sounds like a great idea. Like, I'm down to give it a try. And I met Dorian on our first rehearsal and we clicked instantly. One, because I was wearing obsidian and he was wearing obsidian. And the throne's made out of obsidian. And it's a stone that I really connect with. We started talking and we really vibed. And basically, Dorian's voice, the most crucial part, and I've tried to make it known and to credit where credit is due because my performance was only half of the movement. The second half was the voice. I would feel the notes that Debra gave Dorian and his adjustments would give me the notes I needed for my physical performance. Debra wants this because Dorian changed this, and this is what I should do. We started developing like the psychic link where I could anticipate. Because the thing is, when I'm there, I have to engage the motion, but also the voice has to engage simultaneously. So neither of us as pilot, we're both moving simultaneously. We're both co-pilots in this dance. His vocal performance affected my physical performance, and my physical performance affected his vocal performance. So in the scene, I was hyper-focused on Dorian's voice. That was the only thing I could hear. The sound is muffled inside the dome. So I could only hear Dorian's voice in my head. For me, it was this beautiful moment of synergy and force.
When I was working with Tom, that was magical. I follow Tom, Dmitrious, all of you. Who you are outside of this momentous thing we did is in sync with what Vader is about. It's Vader-esque as far as your philosophies and your commitment to something bigger than what we can understand. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but these guys and that thing that he is talking about as far as us all having to sync and feel something beyond what you can express or define is what gave truth to this installment that we happen to get the chance to do together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a team effort. Thank you for those kind words. Very well said. Every now and then you'll get a question where somebody will say, why couldn't they just have one person do it? And I said, it goes back to Bob Anderson, David, as you said, Dan, yourself, Spencer. And I honestly don't know that it's physically possible for one person to do all that is demanded of Vader. It's a credit to the performers to sync their movement, to sync the voice and all that. It's such a beautiful ballet to bring together such a great character.
It shows respect for the fandom because if you one person tries to do everything, it's not the best. The fans deserve the best. So we had individual specialists doing on their specialized task to give the best of every single element of Vader. to bring together the best character we could.
Chris, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then Marco.
Okay. So, guys, I'm Christian. A pleasure to be part of this. When I received the invitation, I was like, oh, I cannot believe it. I tried to meet every one of you. I don't know if you are planning to come sometime in Brussels. That would be amazing. So the thing is, first of all, I want to thank you, every one of you, because to have all this experience, difficulties, all this preparation to give us the amazing Vader. For us, it's part of our lives since we are kids, and we are feeling like actors when we wear our costumes and try to give a smile, maybe scare face to some kids, but try to impersonate Vader is very difficult, and you made it, guys. And I'm really appreciate a lot if each one of you, because we are all fans and we watch the movies and we take part of our lives. So I'm really appreciate about that. So I'm just going straight to the question. It's my first, how we say, my meeting like that. My first question is, can you guys share a bit of how was your experience in the whole process since you get contact with the Star Wars franchise? And how was the selection all the way to the filming? How was affect your life? Of course, a lot, because you were going to be part of a big project. Just to know more, you already told us all about how things works, the voice, the movement, and that's really amazing. I don't know. I just put the question there, so if just to know, so we can copy also that when we
should. Yeah. Do we jump in first?
Yeah,
sure.
Spencer.
Yeah. So the first audition was a self-tape for me. My agent rang up and he said, we got a self-tape. Great. What's it for? We don't know. I said, what? I'm like, 43 films in here. So Spencer, just roll with it anyway. Come into the workshop. So what do they want? They want a guy walking around the room with authority. A walking around the room with authority. And a few days later, we had a second callback. We got a bit of dialogue now. So come in, do your authority again, walk around. We did a dialogue. Now, I'm starting to get a feeling Star Wars is auditioning an actor to play Darth Vader. But we're still not releasing it Star Wars, the production Star Wars. So the third callback, now it's Star Wars. We still don't know the character is. He's still not wanting to release that. And then the fourth audition, now we know it's Vader, right? So now we're getting really excited. I'm thinking, wow, I'm auditioning for Vader. And this is the presence of spirit hasn't completely took over me yet. I'm just going through the motion and going through the auditions and going through that. Then the very end audition, we had to go to Pinewood Studio. We had a quiet little room that I filmed many times, the band's room. We went in the little room, there was a tent in there, right? We went in, pulled the tent back, and there was the helmet, the suit, the boots, the codpiece, the everything. And I was like, from that specific moment, that's when the character looked at me and I looked at the character. That's when Vader fully took over me. I remember the dresser vividly. When he put the helmet on me, you could see this guy had done this 1,000 times. When he put it on me, the presence changed. As I put it on, the dresser got scared and ran out. I'm Vader, man. Get up, leave me. I turned around, went into dialogue. The atmosphere changed. Felt that with a few characters, Vader takes the trophy. He is an immense presence. The actor feels it. He takes over. And then I got back, because that was my last audition. We've had 5 auditions. I go back, and it's first time really, I thought, oh, maybe great to man Vader. But I knew when he took over me, and I went, no, he's accepted me, and he's chose me. And it was a very special moment. And I said, I had the phone, wait, and he called me a couple of hours later. He goes, Ben, yeah. I said, yeah. We got it. I go, yeah, you got the part. I said, yo, why be so calm? That's that. We just landed the most iconic bad guy on silver screen. And he chose us, man. Come on. So it was literally like that, man. It was like I was just took back to 5 years old, looking at that on that screen watching Vader walk out for the first time, and I'm going, wow, you're off the word, man. It's just incredible to I thank the Emperor for choosing me, choosing us. I remember him at the first day on set, he gave us additional dialogue. And when I normally play my characters, everything comes with it. The movements, the voice, everything. I wasn't trying to be James Earl Jones or anything like that, but a Vader voice come through. And they set up this huge speaker on set because Gareth Edwards hadn't heard me do the dialogue yet. They said, but we're going to set up a speaker because we think you like the way you're doing it. This voice came through to me. He's menacing, man. Every voice actor that does him, they're going to feel it. Doing the voice, it doesn't matter, it's Vader or whatever character. But yeah, that was my journey to being part of the Star Wars family.
For me, it was a journey into darkness. It really was a journey into darkness. When I got the role, I had that freak out moment of thinking that it's not going to be good enough. And also that I have a 1 in a million chance to do it right. So I made that contract with myself that I was going to approach as hard as I possibly could to give my absolute best. My best is like a maniac, really fanatical. I started going through the motions of understanding what it means to be Vader, to be Anakin, to go through that transition. As I was diving into lore, I found myself isolated from other people. So my only interactions were really in my rehearsals and in my movement sessions. And then outside of that, I would isolate from everyone. And I would spend my entire day training. I made like 10 hours a day training. I would start off with doing my walks for 3 hours a day. Then I would do my training for 3 hours a day. Then I would do my rage meditation. I was meditating into rage and seeing how high I could get into peak rage and then calm myself down. This process would take hours. Like in the beginning, it would take forever because once I get to a point where I was raging, my hands would be trembling and my heart rate would be accelerated. And it would take forever to calm back down. Once we started working with Debra, she gave us homework finding a power song. And this power song, our first thing wasn't intimidate the room, or ours was a funeral procession. That was our note that we got when we were auditioning, was this reverence and this solemn stillness, power, and grace with the character. We had this little homework assignment of finding a power song that made you feel powerful, because this installment of Darth Vader is the most arrogant that Vader is. He hasn't been checked. He's just been training. He's gone 10 years of dominating. He is the ultimate thing in the universe in that moment, and he knows it. And that's the arrogant Vader we're portraying. So as we're doing the power song, I would use the power song as a trigger for my rage training. I would meditate to the power song and use it to piggyback my rage training. So when I heard the power song again, it could bring me back to the character instantly. After doing this for months, when we got to set, I was able to let go. But once you let go, I become Vader. The whole experience of meeting people, the friendships, and the journey of creating art was beautiful. But when I finished the project, I was left with these scars I'd created for myself. That opened up Pandora's box, and I had opened myself up to my own inner darkness, and then I couldn't close it. I tried. I teach people how to use meditation as a force of good, how to tap into meditation and the placebo effect to heal themselves. Everything I knew didn't work. I was in a dark place for so long time after filming that I stepped away from the industry for a little bit and just started focusing on passion projects and everything else. Only through taking time away and interacting with fans and understanding what happened truly gave me the experience of looking back with fondness. In the middle of it, I was in this frantic, chaotic energy, and I was Darth Vader. That was my story.
Welcome to the dark side, baby.
Yeah. So I know the spirit of Darth Vader. I felt the presence.
I'll go in a little bit to the audition process. For me, obviously, it started in the stunt world, more about can you handle the movements? I was training a Kenjutsu, traditional Japanese samurai style of swordsmanship. Draw from the auto, do your moves, tuck it back in, Noto, knocking the blood off. So I was already training in that discipline, and I got contacted, and they said, "Hey, there's a Star Wars project, and we'd like you to come in and audition." I usually carry a bit of a beard, and so less gray at that time. But I just thought, oh, this is going to be great. I get to be a Jedi. It's a sword, and I have a beard. It was probably the second or third audition training with Jonathan Usabe, our stunt coordinator, when they said, okay, we know you can fight with a sword, but can you do it without peripheral vision in a helmet? I was in a helmet. At that time, only The Mandalorian was the active Star Wars show. I hadn't kept up with the press to know they were starting Obi-Wan development. I didn't get it until they unbuckled the case and lifted the top. There was Darth Vader staring back. The first couple of rehearsals, and this was still in the audition phase, it was basically American football, shoulder pads with a cape they had stapled to it, and the Darth Vader helmet. That was the first couple of auditions. Once I found out it was Darth Vader, we did the scene from Rogue One, a dance hallway scene. The choreography was, can you do this in the style of Darth Vader, sword work in the style of Darth Vader with that presence? Once I calmed down from my own freak out moment, we worked on it with JoJo. He said it was great. We went to Debra. She said it was great. I actually went on vacation because I didn't want to think about it. So my now wife, at that time, my girlfriend, we went to hike in Zion National Park where there's no cell phones. I had to come back down from a hike and get back in cell phone reception. I had the message on my phone saying, the gig is yours if you want it. I thought, who in the world would say no to this? That was the beginning of my journey. I have that echoing of some of the things Dmitrious and Spencer said. This balance of different emotions I went through, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done because I dedicated myself completely to the physicality of it. An immense amount of humility and a humble spirit of thank you for choosing me. And am I going to be good enough?
The call came, but I had no idea what it was.
It was the balance of emotions for me where you had the humility of saying, I've been chosen to carry this mantle forward. The nervousness of, as Dmitrious mentioned, am I going to be good enough or is everybody going to hate me? Is this going to be the version of Vader that everybody hates? And that same time, that fanatical dedication that you also mentioned, Dmitrious, where you just want to give every bit of yourself. We're fans. And I know what I would expect of Vader if they said this is going to be, as Kathleen Kennedy put it, the rematch of the century. I knew what that meant in terms of my fanhood and said, okay, that's what we have to deliver on. That promise has been made. So that's the bar being set. Then you have to rise to that occasion of it. And as it turns out, obviously, it's one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I often have people come up at shows, whether they're in the 501st or just fans who come up at these conventions and they say, what was your favorite moment? And I say, or they'll look at the pictures I had and say, what was your favorite moment on the set or during the show? Every picture you see and every one I keep is a favorite moment. Between setups, they change lights, lenses, flip the world. It takes a few minutes. We get a breather. During those moments, Dmitrious and I had a stool and they would bring over a fan to cool us down. And then everybody would just leave you alone and you had a moment of silence to yourself. I would look around, take a drink of water and pinch myself and take that moment to say, this is really happening. We have arrived. Appreciate it because now you have time. I tried to make an effort every chance I could to say, remember this moment because it is life-changing. It is paramount in your life. This is something you're never going to forget. So make sure you catalog what's going on. And it was a really beautiful thing that I would watch the rest of the craftspeople on set do their things. One of my favorite things was watching, there was a greens crew and a grounds crew that would come and rake the sand after every take to make sure there were no Nike footprints or reset the plants around the set. It was wonderful watching their attention to detail and knowing we were not just the only people doing all of that dedicated work throughout the process. Watching the craftsmen, the costumers, everyone from top to bottom was one of the most rewarding things I'll ever experience.
So it came to me and I had no idea. I was told it was a kid show. I wasn't that fond, but it is actually. If you go back to George Lucas's original envisionment of what Star Wars is and what Star Wars is, it speaks to the power of being all things possible. But when I first got it, there were several callbacks, of course. There was work being done in my house. It was a chaotic time during COVID. I had to make arrangements to get all this stuff done and the callback with Debra and all that. But I did not find out until a week later. Told, you got the part. Do you know who you're playing? That is a moment everything goes silent. You don't know how to process that. And I tried to really give an understanding of what the story of Star Wars, the story of Darth Vader, the story of Anakin is, with the story of all those who are key and integral in the journey. I watched every Star Wars film. I watched it, like I was saying earlier, George Lucas making understanding where this thing started and understanding James Earl Jones as far as who he was and what he was delivering. And all that is all possibility, which I think is the anchor point of immense power within each individual. The possibility of all things are possible. Don't think, just do. First day on set, I remember the voice of God at the big sleeper. And I was all rigged up. My first moment of delivery, some technical issue, silent. And all that was happening as far as all the details of it was very complicated. It was stunt and special effects and all that kind of stuff. And there was a technical difficulty. Silence. I had to shake that off, and I came back in and delivered my line. I heard in my headpiece the impact and response of my first delivery of channeling Vader. Your voice drops several octaves. Your intensity shifts. Vader takes you over. I could not recognize these men when they stepped off the set because there's a true transformation. I felt that transformation. I'm private, very private, but being part of such a legacy is bananas. Vader, to me, was very much like my father. Vader was very much this presence that stepped into the room. Before it stepped into the room, you knew it was there. And there's something so complex you can't understand when you try to figure somebody out. Forget it, you can't. That's who Vader is, 9,000 steps ahead of me. Despite being the baddest man ever, his drive was centered in love. And look at all the love expressed in each storyline in the manner Vader had to walk, in the world that he had to live, and the things that he was trying to figure out. But think about the driving force that caused all that. And you had to understand how to communicate and deliver that. It changes our lives. Just to be a part of that. Tom, you said something amazing. First day on set, it was like a city, a machine. Every department specialized in what they do, and everything was just humming and buzzing so smooth and efficiently, and all working at one. Electrical, lighting, sound, the whole nine. I remember the first day going to the rock quarry, the amount of people there that were moving in sync as far as all the technical aspects, as well as us in front of the camera. Beautiful. Everything was in harmony and sync. Being a part of it never goes away.
That's amazing how everything is working with these things that you were living together and doing the movies and everything is so amazing. And my next question will try to make more funny. So maybe, of course, always there's a blooper or something about it. So the thing is, do you have any funny stories, anecdotes from set related to costume or some props, or maybe can you share with us if you want?
For me, I've done lots of boys. I've done lots of characters, and every one of them funny stories. You can say this, say that. But Vader was very serious. You couldn't have fun with him. I don't always have a mess about on set with my characters. We do something like this, and I'm trying to scare somebody or make somebody laugh or howl at the moon from a creature or wolfman or this, that, and the other. But Vader, when you're in Vader, that's it. He wouldn't let it. For me, he's a dark, serious character, and that's it. You know what I mean? I'm sure the boys have got something fun for you, but for me, sorry, man, he's just Vader, and you do as you're told, and that's it. You're released at the end of the day.
For me, I fell off the volume. We were filming in the volume, and you have LCD monitors all over. You're inside a whole movie scene, everything, the ceiling, everything's covered in LCD monitors. Once you're in the scene for a while, you lose track of what's real. I'm looking into the distance, and I see a barren moon, and I'm walking into the distance. This is one of those wide shots of the tiny Vader walking across the screen. That was the scene that we're shooting. And we're shooting in the volume, and I have an earpiece. So I'm like, if I get close to the edge, someone's going to yell, cut. I can't see the floor. I only see far ahead in front of me, which means I really could only see the floor when it's 20 feet away. And if anyone's within 6 to 8 feet away, I can't see them. My whole training was posture and presence of Vader. Doing this scene, and I'm walking, and suddenly I'm airborne. I think I just fell. And I looked over, and I'd fallen 5 feet off the edge of the volume. But because I'm an acrobat, my body already knew what to do. I was landing as if I was landing from a flip. So I landed on the floor, and I was like, That's weird. I had walked off the edge of the volume onto the floor. I had this PA, her name was Michelle. And she was, for me, my authority of everything Star Wars. Because my knowledge of Star Wars was only the last 7 months of deep research. But Michelle knew everything. Whenever I had a Star Wars question, I would ask Michelle. She would tell me what things are made of, quiz me, and make sure I was eating and staying hydrated. She was my backbone, making sure I could perform at my best. When we were shooting the throne scene, I'm sitting with Michelle, and she's, I really want to go up and sit on the throne. And I was like, you should. And she's, no, I'm going to get in trouble if I go sit on the throne. Because people are sitting at the lights and everything. If you're doing something that's distracting while everyone's working, then it's not good. So I was like, okay, Michelle, can you come with me? I was like, Michelle, I need to see if this throne is seatable. Can you check if you could sit in this throne? And Michelle's like, yes, Dmitrious, I could check if this throne is seatable. I'm looking at it and Michelle sits into it and I just see her become Vader, like her shoulders pull back. She has this profound moment. For me, the beauty of experiencing someone else have that beautiful kind of experience of seeing their life come together. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I had on set. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for testing the throne for me. Yes, I guess that was my favorite anecdote from the
Well done. There was a piece cut out of the fight where Vader actually does get the high ground at one point. You know what I'm talking about, Dmitrious, when you bury him.
Yeah.
And there's another piece of the fight where he sees me on top of a pillar and cuts it down. They've built this trap door, and the stunt says they typically were filmed in 2 parts. There was one where there was a trap door where they're leering over him, and then at 3, 2, 1, the trap door falls and I fall down and come down this rock pile.
I remember that, yeah.
They filmed the top half and that was fine. They went to the second piece, which is they built this kind of, I don't know what they make the fake rocks of, styrofoam and some other hardening material, but they made a bunch of fake rock pile. They strung me up facing the ground, put the helmet on, do the whole kit, put me up in the wires, and they say, okay, on action, you're going to hit, you're going to roll down. It was about a 10-foot drop, but they're like, you hit, you roll down, and then Ewan's going to step forward. And when he does, you swipe at his feet and we'll pick up the rest of the fight. First or second take, we go up and they hoist me and they're like, you good? I said, I'm good. I got the lightsaber on. And they're like, 3, 2, 1, action. I drop. And when I fell, I must have gotten tangled a bit up in the cables. You act until the director says cut. And so I'm detangling myself, but playing it like that was a hard fall. And I get ready. And then finally I get my arm free and I take that first swing and I crack you right in the shin, who was a nice enough gentleman to come over and check and see if I was okay. Because he thought I had really hurt myself. In the fall,
Vader having a fit on the floor.
So they helped, of course. He had a good laugh. It's not a real sword fight, just a few hits, but that was a funny moment. There was one other. Spencer alluded to the idea that you're not allowed to be silly when you're Vader, and of course, even in the fight beats, I did acting classes and I did my due diligence to make sure I understood the emotional through line. It wasn't just action, smack each other around and cut. There was another moment where I must have had a particularly intense look on my face in between setups and came over and said, I know what you're getting for Christmas. I said, what? And he said, I can sense your presence. I had no choice but to laugh. It was a good funny moment, breaking the tension.
I have another Ewan story also. So Ewan and I avoided Ewan on set most of the time. So only the very beginning, when I first met Ewan, when we did that stunt training day, that was the first time I met Ewan, and that was the only time I allowed myself to fanboy and to actually experience it and tell him how much it meant to me to work with him and everything. And I had just watched everything. So it was super fresh and a really cool experience. Afterwards, I wanted to keep this tension between you and I, because we never should be hanging out or anything else. So I didn't go through the stunt rehearsals. Our only experience was these face-offs that we were having. So I would avoid you and just glare at him from across the scenes when we were in Jabim. Ewan was filming, we were always missing each other because we'd only have standoffs. All fights were done with Tom. He had filmed earlier that day, and then I was filming after him. So we're doing the part where I'm chasing him looking for Obi. As I undress, my suit team helps me take off everything. He had scribbled on the wall, Obi was here. And it was this Tom and Jerry moment. And I was like, Ewan, Obi, I'll get you next time.
I was getting tea in between takes to keep the voice warm. And one of the crew members, I was in a makeshift booth, mic'd and boomed. No one knew where the voice was coming from. They said, "Hey, I haven't met you yet. What are you doing?" Somebody said he's voicing Vader. The guy dropped his food. It's like, oh my God, I thought all that was pre-recorded. You guys are doing that. That was you? And that was such a wonderful moment for me, because obviously what I was doing was effective. The other one that I spoke of earlier, my first day on set, I'm telling you, this setup was bananas as far as the complexity of setting it up. And my first line had a technical difficulty and nothing came out of the voice of God. And so when I'm speaking, it was silence. Nobody heard my performance and it was dead. And the scene had to keep on moving, even though Vader, everybody was waiting for their cue from Vader. The first one at the craft service table was interesting.
Thank you for sharing this experience. The last one, Dmitrious mentioned something about, my next question is about that. Is what was like working with the green screen in the volume? So we heard about Dmitrious that almost fell. But the thing is, nowadays, the filming industry went to very, very good. Now from Mandalorian and all the further series, we're creating with the screens, the volume. And so how was the experience with the other guys about that?
For me, it was a magic experience. Having the volume was one of the greatest tools ever as an actor. It makes things a lot easier to see where you're at, to feel where you're at. Yeah, it was one of the most immersive, coolest things, especially the scene where I pulled down the ship. I could see the ship, a version of the ship. That was really cool. Being able to see your environment around you helps bring you to the moment. We had this funny volume moment where we were filming that specific scene, and they did this change where they had moved a rock to a different place and they're flipping the orientation. And I had been in the space for like 6 hours already. So this is my new reality. Your brain forgets after a while, this is where you're at on this planet. They shifted something. I got vertigo because they moved a rock and they shifted a wall. Oh my God, all of reality is in front of me. Because for that moment, I forgot I was in the volume. It was really cool.
Did you guys do Mando season 1? Was that volume? Or
Yes. Yes. That was my first introduction to the volume. They moved the sun and that blew my mind. Because some of the lighting from the volumes, we're on this winter planet and they moved the sun. I was like, oh my God, they moved the sun. Craziest moment.
I've worked a lot of blue screen, green screen, but when you see Vader walking through this theme, having his moment with Krennic, that's a real set. There's no blue screen. Only so many people are allowed on set, director, producer, and no more than 4 or 5 people on set at the same time. Only people can walk on with a cover for the shoe.
The shoe booty.
I remember leaning forward. The floor was a mirror, but it just gives you what on the film is what we're seeing as well through the costume. It is bang on. It's just like that. It's no CGI at all. It's very real. Great for the actor to perform in that. I mean, the deck as well. I was looking out the window. You see the little ship going by. You know what I mean? Brilliant.
Thank you for your question, Chris.
Thank-
We all very much appreciate those. Marco, I would like you to introduce yourself and then whatever questions you've got, ask away.
Hello, everybody. I'm very honored to be part of this panel with all of you. I'm Marco from Lima, Peru. Star Wars fan since I was 8 and went to the movies to see Return of the Jedi. I'm also a proud member of the Legion, of the 501st Legion, since 2012. And for 12 years, I've played Darth Vader tons of times in conventions, parades, premieres, but also in children's hospitals, in shelters. And the power Vader emanates with his presence is incredible. I have a couple of questions. What was the most surprising thing you learned about Darth Vader while playing him? Has portraying Vader changed the way you view the character as a fan or actor?
Great question.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Marco. I think that's amazing. Just a nod to everyone in the 501st. I knew of the 501st, but I didn't quite know the depth of what the involvement was in the community and how the community was served other than parades and such. And when I learned about the hospital visit. Dmitrious and I were lucky. A lot of the 501st members were on set with us, and getting to talk to the Vaders and the troopers and hear their stories about experiences in the hospitals is just, I was moved to tears. I said to the guys, you do the real work. We get to play pretend, but you guys are doing the real work. So I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
To get to your question, the easy answer is yes. When I was doing auditions for the role, I really wanted to get to know the character more than just the movement and the sword fights and all the lightsaber fight. That's fun, but I wanted to be acquainted with the character. Debra wanted, and I think Dmitrious and Dorian echoed, was we didn't just want to do a mechanical repetition of what David Prowse or Spencer had done. We wanted to know the character inside and out, so everything was organic. The performance was organic. One of the interesting things I noticed when I was watching the Clone Wars and interviews and materials was something that George Lucas said, and then Hayden echoed, and then now Dave Filoni echoes, is even when Anakin had followed the dark side and became Darth Vader, he was still the chosen. There was this idea I had come to working with my acting coach, and then that was verified by Debra, his quest for revenge and what he believed was right was righteous. No criminal believes they're bad. And I don't want to call Darth Vader a criminal, but I want to say that character believed his actions, even when he was Darth Vader, were righteous actions. Those were things that had to happen. And something I tend to point out to fans, there's a particular story arc that seems to be revisited in Ahsoka that, you know, Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka went to Mortis. And they, at the time, Anakin had visions of Darth Vader, of himself as Darth Vader. Their memory was supposedly wiped when they left Mortis, but I always had this vision that wouldn't it be much more interesting of a story from Anakin and from Vader's perspective if he knew exactly what he had to do, if he knew he had to isolate himself, sacrifice every friendship and every bit of good in him to further propel himself to the dark side, because he also knew that the Emperor would see right through it if he put on a false front and pretended to be in the dark side, right? He had to fully commit to the dark side to bring balance to the Force. And to me, that's so much more of an interesting character choice than he fell to the dark side and he was seduced and just became dark by accident or by folly or whatever it is. To choose to go down that path is so much more of an interesting character choice to me. And to learn that about the character and to embody that in the character, that righteousness in that fight against Obi-Wan, that was a great learning experience. And it made me further appreciate the story as a fan.
Darth Vader, Anakin, has the closest and purest connection to the Force than anyone else because he experienced both the light sides and the dark sides of the Force to the full out. He went through Jedi training and understood the dark sides, where everyone else only experienced half of the Force. My quest was understanding, what does the Force mean? What does duality mean, light and dark? And why would the Force help both sides? That was my question. And as I dove into the character, I discovered the dark side gives embodiment to the Force. The light side is through stillness and intuition. The dark side is through power and aggression. Sometimes when one side doesn't work, the other side has to shake things up for people to wake up. If it doesn't work one way, the Force will do it the other way. The Force goes on for eons. The lifespan of a single person doesn't matter. But it's important for those people in that situation. But for the Force, it will help both sides, as long as they have resolve and they show up and they believe in what they're doing. And the Sith believe in what they're doing, and so do the Jedi. And that's what gives them the power within the Force. But specifically with Darth Vader, his only friend is literally the Force. He's not a chatty person. He doesn't hang out with any people. He doesn't talk to the stormtroopers. He's in a place of authority. He might speak 1 or 2 words a day, if he even speaks. And when he speaks, he's speaking a command to someone, right? He doesn't have a, hey, how are you doing? How's your mom? He doesn't have any of these conversations. So you have moments where the only time he's authentic is in his internal dialogue and his communication with the Force. And in fact, he has this intimate relationship with the Force that he always has had. That's what made him the chosen one. Where other people needed specific training, he just felt what was right and he acted on it. When he was racing pod racers, that was his connection. He could just feel the right choice and would do the choice without having any kind of words to describe what this was. Later on, when he went through the Jedi training, they started labeling, saying, this is wrong, this is right. You're putting too much emotion. You have to sever yourself from emotion. And that's what created the inner conflict. When he becomes Vader, he becomes his true self in a sense. Not the darkness, but being free to feel his emotions tapping into his emotions and intuition. That connection with the Force allows him to be 1,000 steps ahead of
The Force is life. There is no bad, there is no good, there is life. It is all, it is one. And when you have a lens from something that we all can't truly comprehend due to attachment of emotion in our journey as human beings, there's a statement saying when the universe speaks at once, you can't understand it. We focus on little fixated points to comprehend what is. Vader had an understanding of beyond all of us. He had an agenda, a purpose, mission, and humanity behind him. My discovery of the humanness and that bonding with what Force is, which is what life is, which is all of existence. Dmitrious made reference to yin and yang. There's a balance to all things. Without balance, how do you know what is good and bad? And how do you find what's within you without being challenged? And the balance of what you define as bad and what it will do and how you will find what is deep within you beyond possibility. The humanity in him and the power, which we all have and all of life and existence has, of all things being possible. But having a purpose and a mission and personal desire is what I glommed onto as far as Darth Vader, who is beyond just being Darth Vader as this villainous presence. He started off as a human being. He started off as this chosen one. Understand what that quest is. No one can truly understand you, and you can't even truly understand yourself. But the power within you is beyond comprehension and understanding, which you can channel and engage. I learned that, and I learned possibility as far as Darth Vader is concerned, and not having judgment, looking through a different lens. I find true love in a lot of things that were done in his path and his journey of redemption. And that's an interesting road that had to be chosen for him to show and embody that. It gives us a different perspective on judgment and how we perceive things as far as what that truly is.
Phenomenal questions so far, guys. Unfortunately, our time is starting to slowly come to an end. Luke, we got to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Aloha, everyone. My name's Luke. I'm from Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. I'm actually at work. It's 1:30 for me. Pleasure being on this. I have been blown away by a wonderful conversation, and pretty much all my questions got answered, but just a couple basic ones at this point. Being in Hawaii, it's really hot. What did you guys do to stay cool in the suits?
Spencer, take over for us.
I was probably the coolest. I just walked a little. It was a very cool shoot for me. I didn't do much action, just walking around, talking, being in the Force, and putting on some other people. When we walked with this team, we went blind. We had to use the Force then. That's when our acting skills come in, memorizing the set. Having a peeky look above the helmet, we couldn't do that because it took a little bit of time, putting a 3-piece, 4-piece. You just got to visualize that set, take a picture in your mind's eye, and then you're going down the ramp, the little metal bits in between the runs, make sure you don't stand on that because it looks like Vader's getting a bit awkward and losing his step, you know what I mean? Because you got to float down them steps. Yeah, man, that's for me. He wasn't a bad thing, but the boys are going to give you some good answers now. They probably sat in a bucket of ice at the end of the day. There you go.
They offered me liquid cooling. The suit already had 8 layers, and because we were wearing muscle suits as well, I did not want an extra piece of equipment on me. So I chose to be hot. My team, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I wouldn't have been able to dress, undress, do anything. Michelle, my PA, would make sure that every time I would stay hydrated. And it was this perfect balance of, it takes me 20 minutes to get in and out of the suit. I'm drinking only fluids with electrolytes with salts in it so I could retain water, but only enough that I don't have to use the bathroom. Knowing how often to drink so I could film on set and be engaged before having to relieve myself. In between takes, the team fan me, fan underneath the dome to make my goggles clear up. They would fan into the suit, and they were my bread and butter. They honestly were the ones that were keeping me from overheating. Without them, I would overheat. In fact, there was 2 times that I almost fainted in the suit, specifically from overheating. One time when we were shooting the fire scene and I had walked into the fire accidentally, there was a moment where I was starting to become wobbly, and one of my dressers was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I am." He's like, "No, he's not okay." And production had to stop for about 10, 15 minutes for me to feel better. And that was really crazy and a beautiful experience, because basically he's telling the director, he's telling the producers, he's telling the entire set, every single person, that you have to pause right now and wait for him to feel better. He removed the wardrobe from me, and I had a moment where I had to just sit down for 15 minutes and regroup myself and then jump back into the scene. Another time we were filming the throne scene, which was very minimalistic, but there were so many lights. And even though I wasn't moving much, we shot that for 14 hours. I was literally passing out, and they gave me a break to get out of the suit and move around. It all comes back to having an amazing team, and you're only as good as your team.
Praise be to the team. The dressers are the heroes. It was really hot. Dmitrious alluded to it earlier. The show sort of crescendoed at the end there, and I think it was like 10 days of shooting straight, fighting. Anybody that's worn the Vader kit knows it's not the coolest. It's like wearing a leather quilt. They were freshly made and very nice showpieces. It's almost like a stiff leather when we first got them. I would intentionally warm up and get sweaty so that it would actually like loosen the leather and make it a little more pliable. That didn't take much time. You don't want to hold up production. You didn't want to drink so much that you had to stop and go to the bathroom. When I do physical stuff, whether it's playing sports or whatever, like I don't eat a lot beforehand because I tend to get a sick stomach. I was eating small lunches, mostly staying on fluids. At lunch, I would get mostly undressed. In my dressing room, I would lay on the floor with my feet up against the wall to let the blood circulate and decompress my lower back. When you put on the kit, you stand up straighter, grow a couple inches. And it's also just heavy. Helmet alone, I think, is 8 to 10 pounds of helmet and shroud, and then add on all the rest of the kit. You're lugging around quite a bit extra weight. So it's definitely a hot one, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
I've got a question for Dorian. When I'm getting pumped up, I've got a couple of my favorite Vader lines. I think to myself and get in the energy. I really like him. And just the very first scene we see him where he's super mad. What are the lines that got you into your mode? I know you did a lot of research on trying to blend the characters together between the screen and the video games.
You got to forget all that. I had to give truth to the moment. There's music. That's always helpful. Track lists I will not share. Vader really takes over you. I have to continually state that I'm feeding whenever I do whatever I do. It's when you are engaged, you are responding either to history, life, or what is to come and what is before you. In that most powerful scene, which I won't state because I might drop into the Vader voice, the phrase was, "You were warned." I couldn't tell you what happened because a lot of times I wasn't there. I was so connected to what was happening in that scene. I truly felt taken over. As Spencer mentioned, my prep is music, meditation. Dmitrious and I had a meditation session earlier on. He showed me some methods, and that was beautiful. And but you have to get centered, calm, quiet. Don't think, let it go, and let it take over you.
I want to add a footnote to that scene just because I think you, Dorian, and Dmitrious will probably appreciate this, to know that another Vader was actually helping hold up Moses. I remember that. When you're on the stunt team, and if you have rigging experience, you help with the wires. I was helping the rigging team. We put out a little porthole that was probably like a 6x6 porthole where we could see down into the Fortress Inquisitorius, and we actually saw Moses. When Dmitrious, when you storm in and you do the lift and we hear the voice from Dorian, we would actually pull on that wire and help hold Moses up during that scene until you release her. Cool. One Vader is actually helping another Vader out.
I thought I was lifting her myself.
Movie magic. You were super sorry.
No, I signed that scene. When I talk to fans, that was the one scene I signed. It's one of my favorite moments with Dorian. Yeah. You were warned. Oh, man.
Don't make me do it. It's like baiting them now.
Awesome, brother. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's just about all the questions I had. I did hear one thing earlier from you, Dmitrious, that you had a homemade suit before you started shooting. Could you give us a little bit of what that was like?
It wasn't a homemade suit. It was pieces I had found. Basically, I had asked production, can you give me a suit at home? And they said, no. No. Can I get a helmet? No. Okay. So Olga and I were working on trying to figure out what the limitations were. So we were trying to get together as many pieces. I ordered specific boots. I ordered leather gloves. I had a cape. I got a mantle from, I don't even remember where I found it, but basically pieces from Etsy, from other people. So I had a helmet, a mantle, a cape, boots, gloves. And that's what we worked with specifically to work on cape choreography. There's a way to maneuver a cape to not make it awkward. You also learn not to step on your cape. You have to learn how to walk backwards and forwards with the cape. I'm going to let Tom interject because there's a moment where Tom stepped on his own cape and he fell because it's hard to do the fighting. If you move backwards, you're going to step on your own cape.
Yeah.
Can you tell the story?
I definitely choked myself out very forcefully. When you step on the cape and that mantle comes into your throat right at your Adam's apple, that's something you won't forget.
I remember seeing Mrs. Kennedy. She stood on the cloak, and his fourth just flipped his cloak back. I think Kennedy did a backflip. I was like, oh, my God's going to end real quick if she lands wrong. But no, it was all right. She didn't flip, luckily. She got a little trip.
Yeah, that's what we did. So we didn't know what limitations we're going to get. So I just got every piece that I could to form a suit. I'd have a helmet where I could see how much it fogged, how little I could actually see. That was the first revelation. I'm not going to be able to see that much at all. So and then the boots also, walking in boots and walking wearing lifts or boots with a heel, which we had. It changes how you walk. It changes your posture. If you're not used to it, you might be pitched forward a little bit. We had a lot of work with a mirror specifically to maintain the posture of Vader. The absolute hardest thing for me to do is walk downstairs and walk down that ramp.
Yeah.
Just because it's really hard not to walk down, but to maintain the posture. You're walking in faith. And if you walk wrong, you will not be able to catch yourself because you have to maintain the posture. So you can't counterbalance like you normally would. You have to maintain the Vader posture. So if you step wrong, you're going to immediately go into tumble. We're doing the scene from the Bacta take. That was the hardest scene, like the 40 takes. I almost fell down those stairs 27 times. The fog machine is on, so you cannot see. I had all the pieces that I could. And later I auctioned off the pieces for charity. At the time, the war of Ukraine was just starting. So I auctioned off every piece and I was able to raise something like $20,000.
Dorian, is there any chance you could give us one line before we wrap up?
Did you really believe you could defeat?
Oh, beautifully done. I am, for one, very grateful for every single one of you to show up here today. It was a phenomenal discussion, and I wish it could go on for twice as much time as we've already taken up. Thank you all for your time.